right, here we go. We're going to start on lesson 2. Task number 2, peaches and plums. If we read it, it says, the graphs below show the cost Y of buying X pounds of fruit. One graph shows the cost of buying X pounds of peaches, and the other shows the cost of buying X pounds of plums. Notice you got your peaches here and your plums there, okay? Which kind of fruit costs more per pound? Well, if we look at this, what do we remember about the steeper slope? That tells me what? That it's going to cost more per pound, right? So which kind of fruit costs more per pound? I'm going to write in that first section, peaches. Okay, because peaches is a lot steeper, right? Has a greater rate of change. Okay, we're going to use that rate of change because that's something that we use in lieu of slope a lot when we're talking about real world examples. So peaches because it has a greater rate of change. All right, then your next question says, bananas cost less per pound than peaches or plums. Draw a line alongside the other graphs that might represent the cost Y of buying X pounds of bananas. All right, so where do you think you're going to draw that? Are you going to draw it up here? You're going to draw it in the middle? Or are you going to draw it down below? Hopefully you said down below, okay? So I'm going to recreate that graph over here because I'm not going to draw on my original. So peaches, okay? And then you have plums. And then anywhere you want down here, doesn't have to be exact, you're going to do bananas. Okay? Does that make sense? That part's pretty easy, right? All right, give me just a second. I'm going to switch over to the next part because I think this task is pretty simple. So just remind, peaches has a greater rate of change. And then you're going to draw your bananas down below. Okay, no questions on that? All right, erasing this. This is always so much fun trying to make do at home. Hope everybody else is doing good. All right. The next thing that you see is task number 3, independent and dependent. Okay, I'm just going to do these first 6 with you, and I'll leave you with 7 through 11 to try on your own, okay? So we're going to go through these. These are independent and dependent. Remember, independent is always your X, and dependent is your Y when we're talking about linear equations. When we're looking at words, the independent is what occurs first, and then the dependent is the result of whatever occurred. Okay, so if we look at number 1, it says the height of the grass in a yard over the summer. So if I think about that, the height of the grass is going to depend on the weather over the summer. If it's too dry, then that grass is not going to grow. Or if it's really, really, really wet, it's not going to grow. Or it won't grow healthy. Okay? So it has to have that right balance of sunlight and precipitation, etc., etc. So in number one, my independent, and I don't mind however you want to do this. You can abbreviate, you can underline, whatever. So in this case, the independent would be the summer, right? Because the summer is going to come no matter what. Okay, and then the grass is going to depend on how that summer went. So dependent, I'm going to put height of grass. Makes sense so far, guys? Height of grass. So number 1, independent, the summer, dependent, height of grass. And I apologize about my handwriting. It's a little sloppy right now, trying to film with one hand and write with the other. Okay, number 2. The number of buses needed to take different numbers of students on a field trip. Okay, so when I think about this, I'm not going to get a bunch of buses out front of the school and then say, okay, I need X amount of kids to come fill these buses up. No, when we're doing a request for a field trip, we always let them know, hey, we're going to have X amount of students, and then they provide us with the buses. So if I'm looking at this, I'm going to start off with the number of students is going to be my independent. So on number 2, independent, number of students. Okay. Number 2, number of students. Does that make sense? And then my dependent will be number of buses. I'm sorry, my handwriting is atrocious right now. Okay. I have to show you my setup, how I've got it right now. That's kind of crazy. All right, number 3. Looking at number 3. It says the weight of your dog and the reading on the scale. Okay, so when I look at that, you're going to bring your dog into the vet, and they're going to put him up on the scale. And it's going to depend on how much that dog weighs as to what that scale reads, right? So the scale's not going to change, and then I bring the right dog in, right? I'm going to bring the dog in first. So bringing the dog in, so the dog, weight of your dog is your independent. So independent weight of dog. Okay, independent weight of dog. And dependent is the scale, whatever it happens to read, right? Everybody make sense so far? So again, 1, independent, the summer, dependent height of grass. Number 2, independent, number of students, number of buses is dependent. And number 3, independent is the weight of dog, and dependent is the reading on the scale. So you good on those 3? Okay. So number 4, the amount of time you spend in an airplane and the distance between your departure and your destination. Okay, so this one's a little different. I'm trying to think about that. So the amount of time that I end up being on that particular plane is going to depend on how long that trip is, right? So if I'm going, let's say, from here to New York, my trip's going to be pretty long compared to here to Atlanta, okay? So big difference. So the distance, right, is going to be my independent, because that's going to determine the time, right? So when I do number 4, independent, I'm going to say distance, right? Distance. You don't have to write out distance between your departure and destination. We know the distance is going to be the independent. That's going to determine how long we're on that plane. So dependent would be time on plane, right? Right? If I'm going from here to Atlanta, it's only going to be an hour or 2. If I go from here to New York City, it's going to be 5 or 6 hours. Depending on if you get a direct flight, and we won't get into all that. Oops, I was skipping to number 6. Ooh, I'm ready. Tired. Okay, 5. Well, let's look at this one. This one sounds weird. Don't worry, I would not have a question like number 5 on the test, because this is something, I don't know about you guys, but you probably have never made candles before. All right, so the number of times you dip a wick into hot wax and the diameter of a handmade candle. All right, so every time I dip into that hot wax, it creates another layer, right? And that diameter is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So if I only dip it a few times, it's going to be a really skinny candle. If I dip it a lot, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the independent in this case would be number of dips, right? In wax. I'll put it like that, otherwise it sounds weird. And then dependent would be the diameter, okay? Now, some people might argue with this one. Let's say, and this is why I would not put on a test. Let's say you are making candles for people and they tell you they want a certain diameter candle, then you would know how many times to dip it. So 5, like I said, it's one of those questions that I would not use on a test. All right, number 6, the amount of money you owe the library and the number of days your book is overdue. Okay, so at Goshen, it's 10 cents every day. So the amount is going to depend on how many days. Does that make sense? So my independent would be days overdue, and my dependent would be amount, right? Because if I'm only 2 days overdue, that's 20 cents. But if I'm 10 days overdue, that's a whole $1. So big difference in the amount. I hope that made sense. You should be able to do task 2 and then finish up this task 3. You got 7 through 11 left of these independent dependents. I know you guys can do these. Do your best and turn it in. That's all I ask. I don't mind. It can either be, you can write it out on a piece of paper and take a picture with your phone and either email it to me or upload it in Google Classroom. However, I will get it because I'm constantly checking both. I hope everything's good. If you need anything, please let me know, and I'll do whatever I can to help you out.